Ah, beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get started. So we'll begin with the introduction to the team. Hopefully this isn't news like any of you guys, but yes, we are the finance sub team, just the two of us, like myself, like as finance manager, and then Eugene as VP finance. But what does that exactly mean? Like, what do us each do, like inside of the sub team? So to begin with, we'll just go over like what is the kind of high level compendium must dos like of Isaac International, and how our roles fit into that. So according to Isaac International, we must like govern and manage the global association, the facilitate and lead operation and communication between members towards the organizational purpose and goals, and represent and act on behalf of the global association. There are also a number of services that like we have to do, and we'll get more specific into which ones are our responsibility as the finance sub team very shortly. But to give a high level overview, it's association governance, association legal management, association financial management, information management, operations management, brand management, sales and partner management, and long-term organization development. So hopefully, when looking at that, you have a little bit of a rough idea of which ones like maybe more falling under the responsibility of the finance subteam. Okay, so going forward, just give you a little bit of an introduction to like my responsibilities as a finance manager. What exactly does that look like? Well, we have a set number of JD goals, right? That are kind of our KPIs, like and measure success for the front office team. That's percentage of gap collected, percentage debt repayment plans fulfilled, and the planning, delivery, and budget tracking and overall execution of IC 2025. So my specific job description, what are the responsibilities that are like under my area? Firstly, is conference management for IC 2025. I am the main point of contact with the CC and CCP and help facilitate communication between the Congress Committee, like here in Sri Lanka, and then the other members of the core team, like back in Canada. Also in charge for the A 2025 strategy implementation in synergy with Global Funds Board. So there are specific aspects of the A 2025 midterm direction that I'm required to help oversee the implementation of, mainly relating to finance reporting and evolutions in that area. Additionally, there's network operations management. So in synergy with the ELD sub team, like tracking like our overall like operations, profitability, and so on. Network services, so being responsible for the finance network, global calls, newsletters, summits like GFS and the academies, being responsible for GDPR implementations at the network, and then also being responsible for communication alignments with Global Funds Board. Key synergies are with IC 2020 by CCP and CCEB, the GDPR GST, EOD managers, BPIM, OD managers, VP Finance, GFP Chair, and GFP Mate, and lastly, VP EOD. That's not a full list. I think you could argue that like when you have a team on the scale of Isaac International, you end up having a solution to everybody. But as a bit of an overview, that is like the general perspective. So going a little bit more into detail about what that means for each of them. In terms of finance manager with the OD managers, what we'll be looking at here is entity reporting. Are the entities like doing well? Are they not doing well? Like what is needs to be the focuses for like the upcoming month? Sustainability metrics, like what is the current state of each of the entities? Debt repayment and gap collection. How are we like interacting with these entities? How are we getting money from them? And then just looking at regional trends such as profit and loss, profitability, and so on. With the ELD managers, it's more about program profitability and overall product strategy. What is the outlook for each of our programs and where do you see them going? Pricing review, contracts and legalities, and again, product trends, such as gross profit margin, product contribution, and different entities, and so on. And then finally, with Eugene, it's in terms of AI team reporting. How are we presenting the overall financial situation of the network to AI team. Gap collection and debt management, again, how we like facilitate its interaction with the entities. IC management, because it's a project that concerns both of us, and also contractor management. So how we like looking after the seeders, seeing to their payments and also the return on investments that we are putting towards each seeder. So I'll just pass over to Eugene now to talk about some of his responsibilities as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. In terms of the scope and the JD of the VPF on Isaac International, essentially the JD goals are the same as the finance manager, but in terms of the job description, it's more with regards to the governance of the organization, but also just the finances of Isaac International itself, rather than more of like the network related things. And so. In terms of the JD, one of the first things is that we're responsible for the management team meetings as well as just organizing those agendas, the topics, as well as the conversations that occur. And so, again, just talking with the different management team members and then facilitating those discussions each week. And so, there's going to be that. There's going to be that PAI and also that management chair dynamic. And so the PAI doesn't actually lead the management team meetings. It'll be all done by the VPF. And then there's a separate meeting that the PAI runs. And so in terms of more of the administrative, more of like the legal things, it's the VPF that runs those conversations. And then, of course, there's just the daily and then the financial and management aspect of the sub team that we have in terms of the synergies. We also have a lot of work related to the internal and external audit, so communications with the accountants that we have, and so we have weekly calls with our accountants, and then we're also in constant communication with the external auditors. It's a bit more consistent right now and more busy just due to the fact that we have a bit of a outstanding external audits, but after that's caught up, then hopefully it'll be not as intense before. But most of the time, it's sort of understanding, okay, how can we make sure all of the books are reconciled? What are the things that are being categorized correctly? Are they not being categorized correctly? And then basically being able to show proofs for the external auditors. And then again, it's just planning and monitoring the budget. And so this is again something that we work alongside the management team as well as the accountants for. And so it's a lot of again, how do we keep the finances of the organization at the global secretariat more aligned? And then again. There's other AI member responsibilities. So things such as like doing conferences, planning, replanning, etc. Later on, like during transition period, the VPF is also responsible for certain transitions. So for example, we're the responsible for the management team transition period. And so there's other things like that that you'll find out later on in the roles. In terms of the key synergies, you can take a look over there. A lot of them are mostly with the management team members, not necessarily with the network. And then a lot of external stakeholders. So anytime we speak with our accountants, our lawyers, it's typically through the VPF that we go through all of them. And if you go through the next slide, Sam. Thank you. And so this is essentially what some of the synergies look like. So for Mate, it's a lot more of the governance systems implementation, the mandates, the budget line execution, legalities, reporting, and the moderation of the meetings. For VPF and then PAI, it's again more so looking in terms of the audit status, legislations. Again, budget execution, Montreal International, and so they're the essentially the organization that brought us to Canada, essentially sponsoring us and then also supporting us with our work permits for all of the AI members, and then also just making sure that like all like the legalities as employers are being followed and fulfilled in terms of what we're supposed to be doing. And then with the VPF and BD, it's more with regards to our power corner. So also with the PAI in that case for the power corner to understand sort of the financial outlook of what the organization is looking like, what's our cash flow, because one of the big things is that we're running on an accrual budget, not a cash-based budget, and so it's important to look both at the income statement, but then also looking at that cash flow statement. And then just looking at the partner receivables and then understanding why some of the AR aging schedules are the reason as to why they are that. So why is an AR, like for example, accounts receivable 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? What are the invoices and how can we collect? And then just monitoring the BD subsidy overall, just in terms of the achievement as well as the costs to see, okay, if we recognize that we're not actually achieving, then okay, where do we have to actually draw the line for the budget cuts, and then the IC execution aspect as well when it comes to some of the global partners. And if we go to the next slide, I can go over some of the context of the previous histories that we've gone through. And so if you go to the next slide, these are essentially the beautiful faces of the previous previous finance sub teams, and so you can see for finance manager role, you can see it's Yoseli, then it was Mary, Luchka, and then you see Sam here, and then for VPF it was Caro, and then Caro again before Caro, and then Yoseli, and then Sajana, and then myself for the VPF role. And so we'll go over quickly just in terms of some of the main milestones that existed within each year. And then if you have any questions, where you can always feel free to write it in the chat as well. I'll send the Q&A chat thing again in the Zoom just in case anyone has questions. But in terms of 1819, one of the biggest things that was implemented was the GDPR aspect. Essentially, a lot of the challenges came with sort of GDPR being this very newer concept that we were implementing, and so really trying to see how we can actually have that there. Another big thing was literally just the move from the Isaac Netherlands headquarters to Canada. I think that was the biggest thing in terms of just legalities because the team wasn't really aware of sort of, okay, what is the actual like finances, legalities, and processes within this new country that they were moving to. And then also the global distribution model and TCS models were revamped back in 1819. And so there's a lot of disruptions within the timeline. And so they were essentially looking at, like, okay, because of this new timeline, how can we essentially have a new model that is relevant for the organization at that current point in time? And so those are some of the highlights. In 1920, it was sort of looking at, okay, how can we have a more profitable network in terms of seeing how we can get more revenue as an organization. And then we had the roadmap execution just because we were essentially closing up the year in terms of the A2020 roadmap. And then the final part was, again, the global office establishment. So because we were still very new, I remember visiting the office back then, and it was like essentially bare, but seeing how they can actually really establish it and then also make sure that they could start closing off the activities that are happening in the Netherlands so that they can essentially transfer some of those the finances from there to Canada. And so that's still in progress to this day, but hopefully we'll be closing that very shortly. And then if you go to the next year, the key focuses were refreshing the finance standards in 2021. And this year is also, you can see that instead of saying like 2021, like 20.21 and like 1920, it's 2021 because this is specifically when the timeline also changed. So in the previous year, the team took on an extra half year so that they could change the timeline based off of COVID. And so this year they focused on the refresh standards. There's entity debt risk. So looking at, okay, how can we look at mitigation plans for EIDs? Because at that point there was, I think, like 900 to $1 million outstanding. And then also looking at data systems to see how they can improve the quality of data collection and to reliably collect data from entities when it came to the finances. And I think another thing that isn't listed here is more so just, again, the new timeline that existed and just as a finance department how we could essentially adapt to that, just because with that new timeline different things changed. So again, like we had like for example, PAI elections used to always be at IPM, but now it was going to be at IC, and there are these different shifts that occurred during back then. If we go to the next year in 2022, again, the refresh finance standards keeping the momentum. So really looking into sort of seeing how we can focus in the budgeting and analyzing and investing aspect, just due to the situation that entities were in back then, which with COVID was very difficult. And so trying to look at, okay, how can we look at different ways to improve the financial state of the organization through these standards. And then in 2022, one of the big things was the external audit, trying to catch up in terms of some of the external audits. And so There was some delays that occurred with some of the audits that we had. I think this was the year where essentially we were looking into firing the accountants that existed before to get better accountants, and then to essentially catch up on the external audits that we had because since that point we weren't actually caught up. So since we actually moved to Canada, we've never been caught up on the external audits, and so that's something that starting 2022 there was a focus on to really catch up on, and then again. For the last part, it was again seeing how we can better integrate the data systems into the MC Finance job description in terms of sort of how to improve attendances to capacity building spaces or make it so that MCVPs can independently create their own dashboards to improve their finances for their own entity. In 2023, this is the first conference that we had, like first IC since 2019 that was in person, and so this is a huge learning opportunity too. So in terms of as a finance manager, first of all, too, like understand how to run a physical IC, but then also as like VPF, there's also that entire aspect of the check-in process of being able to collect the cash. Do we bring in cash? Do we not do it? And then also like the logistics that surrounded that. And so that was a big focus for that year. And then there's the finance and legal processes standardization. And so there was a lot of essentially in the finance department, what you'll find is as soon as you enter the role, there's a lot of must-dos, and this year is basically just must-dos from Sam and I for the most part. But essentially, looking at essentially how they could better optimize things within their JDs, so that they'd be able to take into consideration different ways to essentially innovate. And then finally, it was the legality as aspect. So again, accounting for the external audits in the Netherlands specifically, so that we could catch up in the Netherlands external audits, so that we can start the process to actually close the account. And one of the things within the Netherlands was that if you want to change the board of directors each year, you'd have to actually go in person to do so. And so, because we were in Canada now, it's a lot more difficult to actually do that. And so, 2023 was the last kind of time, like 2023 was kind of the last time with Yoseli being added as a board director, so that she'd be able to sort of make those changes. And after that, we wouldn't actually go to the Netherlands in person to make these changes just because of the costs associated with it, but also the timing because it takes a long time. In 2024, uh, again, this is last year, and so we again looked into improving the finances and legal processes of Isaac International. So there's a lot of automations that occurred in terms of the systems that we had, in terms of just even create like the distribution models, the GAF models, etc. So a lot of automations there because before we had to hand type every single invoice that was created, but now it's a bit more automated, which helps a lot. Because so it would take literally like 4 or 5 hours just to hand type every single entity's name, all the things, and so it's a lot better now. And then we optimized and expanded the AI financial model, and so this is essentially a way to see how we could better see how we could like support entities in terms of the distribution model. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, and so that's something maybe we'll take a look into going forward. I know the FSC it has been working on something for this upcoming legislation in terms of insights and research, so we'll be taking a look at that. And then also one of the focuses that they had was increasing the number of entities growing sustainably in equity, and so that was one of the big things that they had. And so for 2025, these are sort of the goals that we have, as well as the context that we'll be providing. And so in terms of the main pillars that we have, it's 20% average growth in entities, the dollars revenue recognized for Isaac International, as well as 90% repayment collection. And so for the dollars revenue recognition for AI, it also includes a target of 90% achievement for the global affiliation fees. And we'll quickly go over some of the projects here. And so I'll start. I'll give it over to Sam.
Yes, so just giving a high level overview because this can be addressed inside of the AI 2025 plan presentation, which hopefully is something you guys are able to find and refer to throughout the application process. Our kind of strategies came in a couple of different areas. And you can see they're labeled as either like mine or like machines. On my side, a lot of it came down to like working with like different subteams on AI. So firstly, into the product management advancement, working with the ELD team to come up with better strategies for managing our products. This is mainly in terms of come up with a better system for like managing IGV, a more sustainable financial model for that, and also increasing the number of entities running GTA and GT as more sustainable alternatives like for exchange. Also, in terms of like providing more materials like capacity building educations for entities, um, that's the idea behind the strategy of network financial awareness. So basically providing more system structure in place, especially as a planning and budgeting. Also, target entity support. So looking at how we can utilize the three pillars of like the OD managers, the finance sub team, and global finance board to come up with a cohesive system for working with entities and supporting with their individual problems. And lastly, a debt repayment plan evolution. So something ongoing at the moment, reevaluating how we calculate debt repayment plans for entities, how we implement that in the long term and maximize sustainability as well as income gain for that system. And then on Eugene's side, it's primarily looking again into distribution model revamp and also application like of grants like going forward. How can we utilize the grants that exist in Canada to support ISIC international operations? This is again just an overview of like what we have planned with our three like wildly important goals over here that we mentioned: gap achievement, debt payment collection, and average growth in C revenue. Just going forward, I won't spend like too much time on this, like because this is something I think that you guys can go through afterwards, like when we release the outputs like of the presentation. And we definitely encourage you to like do so. But this is a snapshot like of the financial network, like from January to April. So for the months of the AI time we've had so far. If you know anything about the way that we collect financial information from entities as AI, you'll know that we only collect information after the 15th, of the next month. So at the moment, we only have information going up until the month of April. And then just to give an overview of like how this outlook works, these two charts here show the distribution of revenues at the NC level. That's the chart on the left, and then the LC level. That's the chart on the right. We have different colors representing different segments. For example, BD, conferences, and EY. This is the overall profit and loss outlook on a monthly basis. So starting from January all the way up to April, with blue being NC and red being LC. And then these statistics here represents the revenue and overall profit and loss, both at the MC and LC level. And then this represents the financial position. So bank account, equity, and then receivables and liabilities. The amounts that entities are due, that they are owed, and the amounts that entities owe to other parties. And it includes some notes on the side where you can see a couple of inferences, but we really encourage you to do your own conclusions as well from this. So you can see we just have a couple of conclusions here in terms of the profitability of each program, and then what are the most significant costs. And I will also include the regional breakdown, just to give you maybe a little bit of a sense of what the outlook is in different regions. Again, I won't go too much into detail with this because I think our time is better spent on Q&A. But you can always feel free to go back and look through this at your own pace. So here you can see all of the different regions that we have here, and then some outlooks for each of them. In some cases, I've also made a note of specific entities that kind of distort the overall pattern, and remove them for analysis, where it may be appropriate or may have something gap. So you're welcome to use that in terms of your way forward. Now, Eugene, I don't know if you want to touch on anything here in terms of overall financial state of Iceland International as well.
Yeah, I can go quickly as a quick overview so we can go into the Q&A. But in terms of GAF, this is just a brief outlook in terms of what's been looking like for the past sort of few collections. It is a bit alarming just with regards to the number like the percent in terms of the invoice fee collected, but that also said, we do collect the revenues afterwards too. And so we either have payment plans with entities or we collect them through late payments. And so as of right now, we're hovering around a total collection for the previous fiscal year, so 24-25, around like roughly like 80 percent. If there's an entity that does make some of their missing payments, that does jump up to around 87%. And so that's sort of where it looks like in terms of the outlook. And if you go to the next slide, I can also go into just the receivables. So this is again some of the receivables that we have. It does seem like a lot right now, but again, it's a lot of it has been collected with like the DRP payment plans after IPM. So this was essentially a snapshot of the IPM dates, but then afterwards, through the Q2, Q3 payments, repayments, as well as the outstanding amounts from GAF that were paid later on, this was able to look into it. And so that's essentially like that. But most of this debt still comes from a lot of the entities that are in debt themselves. So that's one of the big things to note. The next slide just goes over in terms of the cash position. It has been updated since then, but essentially one of the big things that we're looking like in terms of the cash is a lot of the times, for example, for our regional conferences, the sales just aren't as high as that we think. And so a lot of the times these regional conferences, whether it's X Pros or RPMs, the sales are highly, if not almost all completely driven by Isaac International rather than the entities supporting as well. And so that's been a huge bottleneck that we've seen in terms of sales capacity within entities. A quick example could be, for example, X Pros this past year. I think in total, maybe we made 5K out of all four of those four X Pros. And this is entities raising money, not AI making the money. So AI, in terms of entity total sales without any split or distribution was roughly around 5K, which is very low. And so this is something that we wanted to sort of take a look at. There's low GAF collection in terms of big red flags, and then also just making sure that we need to monitor all the money. With that said, there is some good sides too as well. And so we have that Netherlands cash that we've been talking about from like 2019, 20, 21, 22. And so we're in the final steps in terms of transferring that revenue and then transferring that cash. We're just waiting to hear from the ministry now and just waiting to hear the next steps. So ideally, we'll be able to get roughly like 1.7 to 1.9 million with TCS, with tax returns, and with the Netherlands money. And so that's where essentially we're looking like as a nice cash inflow. But that said, if we continue like once we get that money, we plan to put that into investments as and have it as a reserve rather than rely on it. Because if we just rely on it, then we'll be eating it, and then in a few years we'll be asking the same question but in a worse state. If you go to the next slide, this is just essentially the debt repayment plans that we have, and so in terms of the DRPs, it's been looking pretty good, and so we've been able to collect a lot. And in this case, in April too, it did drop off to around 50% collection, but that's only due to the fact that a lot of the entities you can see in October and January overpaid their debt amounts, and so that's the reason because they had amounts planned for April, but they paid it earlier, and so that's why it's a bit lower in April that we see. But then, yeah, and so you can take a look in terms of the overall collection, and it looks really good. There are some sort of outstanding cases that aren't typically normal in typical years in terms of the debt repayments, such as the IC as well as the Isaac in Colombia completely paying off their debt, as well as Isaac in Russia also paying it off completely, even though, and so this is going above and beyond sort of the payment plans that we had set, and so that's some of the good outlooks. And then if we go to the next slide, this is essentially just some additional information that we'd like to show you. And so again, we wanted to showcase, again, this is a snapshot at the end of Q1. The additional information in terms of where does an entity stand in terms of ranking for their GAF compared to their exchange rank, just because I thought this would be some good information just due to the fact that our direction is going into exchange. And so this is sort of what we wanted to show you. If it just says NA, they were in EID status, and so that's why they don't have a GAF rank or they were in debt. And yeah, I'll pass it back over to Sam.
Cool. So I think we are very making good time here. We're roughly at 10 minutes remaining for Q&A, give or take. But what we'll say here is if you do still have outstanding questions after this consulting participation, here are some useful contacts you can reach out to. Obviously myself, Eugene, our GFP chair Noor as well, and then Ali from the GFP data management team. GFP responsible for processing network financial information. So you can consult with them if you think there are gaps in the thing. But we do ask for your patience around this time. Me and Eugene do have a conference that we need to fulfill, and we can't promise we can get this 100% focus at this time. But rest assured, we are just invested in next generation. So we will try to follow up with any questions to customers. But with that being said, before we go to the end of the presentation, I'll just point out some resources here. This is our official finance academy on Google Classroom, which you can consult to see all of the information you provide to the finance network. This is a resource created by GFB that highlights the financial state of individual entities. You can check on that to see how individual entities are doing. This year, I put more finance commission calls in the past 6 months. So definitely be sure to check them out to see what topics being highlighted. Also the FSC report from IPM 2025, which goes into a bit more detail about the financial state of the organization. And then of course a global compendium over here as well to see, for example, how the different funds and how the different aspects of ISIC finances work. So I think that's all from our side, the information we have prepared here. We can open the space up the remaining time we have now to Q&A, if anyone has any questions they want to ask us. Just open the sheet as well.
I don't think there are any questions on the sheets right
Okay.
now, but if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to just unmute and then ask.
Yeah.
I actually have one. Um, I just begin it here, okay? Because I will put it later on Q&A, the sheet. I'm just wondering, when it comes to grants projects that you guys did, do you I don't know if uh what is if you guys have more uh projects to approach, or maybe foundation that you've been approaching so far. How was it?
Yeah, I can answer this one. We're not really focusing on it too much. Again,
Hmm.
most of the scope of this would technically fall under BD, but what I'm looking into is just sort of additional things that we could maybe look into. So there's a grant called the Canada Summer Jobs Grant that we'll be applying for again. And essentially this would cover minimum wage workers for Canadians to work under Isaac International as interns over the summer. And so we'd be able to get some extra additional HR over the summertime for paid staff that would be for full time. Uh, so that's what we're essentially looking at right now in terms of the scope. In terms of other types of foundations and stuff like that, that would be under the scope of the BD teams.
Okay, thank you. I think I was clear on.
Any other questions? Going once.
Then I go next. I have a question regarding the accounting. Since you said you fired the accountants a couple of years ago, how does it look like in the bookkeeping software? Like, how up to date is the bookkeeping there? And with this, how much can you actually say about the current state from AI? When, if it's fully updated, then of course it's easy. But if it's not updated, how can you then make assumptions about the financial state of what AI?
Yeah. So in terms of the finances, we do have new accountants. So as soon when we got rid of them, we got new accountants. That was also given to us by Montreal International. So they gave us an organization that they use for their different international NGOs. And so yeah, in terms of the finances, we have like a rough idea. It's not exactly up to date, and so that's one of the big things with the external audits being outdated. And so when we look into sort of exactly QuickBooks, sometimes like we look at it and understand, okay, some of these balances aren't really up to date. Like we're looking at like for example, we have our TCS fund on like our sheets, but we haven't reconciled that yet to the QuickBooks, and so that's sort of one of the big things that we're taking a look at is okay, let's go line by like budget line by line just to see okay, are these things being recognized in the right areas? Because sometimes we like like end of fiscal year is in May, and so sometimes we purchase things in May, but it's for June, but then they recognize it in May. Sometimes we do like for the entity balance adjustments, we have we put in, for example, we do the entity balance adjustment in June, but it was for the May previous year, or we do it in January, but it was for last year. And so there are things like that we still need to update. And so there's a lot of manual stuff that we do with the accountants, but it has been a lot better now. But in terms of that, 100% accuracy on just the online platform, it's not there. We do have other trackers, like a budget tracker, budget execution tracker that we have been doing and using in terms of just the analysis. But like, of course, it's not the most ideal. And so we're shifting now over again to getting the reports done by the accountants. And then every month, we're trying to reconcile with them while working on sort of catching up on the past audits and stuff.
Okay, thank you. I have one follow-up question regarding it then. How do you track then the invoices you're sending out if they are not in QuickBooks?
Oh no,
Like,
no, invoices are all in QuickBooks.
okay, fair enough.
Okay. Any further questions from anybody?
Maybe in general, what data can we ask and get provided? For example, I don't think I have access to all the legislations in the last, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. Or can we also see the balance profit loss from AI somehow? Like how many receivables are older than 2 years or older than 1 year? Is it possible or is that then not disclosed?
In terms of the like, you can take a look at the most recent external audit, and then you can also approach your MCP as well in terms of the resources. Maybe we can create a folder later on with some of the reports that we have, the financial reports that we share with the MCPs. But if you want more accurate numbers too, like more like audited numbers, you can take a look at the external audits. And we recently sent it out to the MCPs just the other day.
Okay, but
Yeah, I
then
think
the external audit is from 6 years ago, if I get it right, because there have not been any external audits since AI moved to Canada.
No, 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 no. We're right now we're working on the 21, 22. So we're caught up to 2021 now, and then we're doing 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24. Um, yeah. And
Okay.
so those are the ones that we're doing. And then if you want, like let's say you can talk to the I because I think for BD, I think we could maybe ask for the AR. I think that should be fine. Uh yeah. So those are some of the things. In terms of total like entities like AR that you if you want to see stuff like that, you can always look at the entity balances sheet to look at directly how much is the like opening balance of all the entities to see from the entity side how much is outstanding.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate, this is kind of the difference, like with finance versus say like I don't know, like exchange, like or MX like area. Like the information, a lot of data like does exist, but it's a little bit like more difficult to like centralize with some of the factors usually was explaining amongst like other things. So we definitely invite you guys to like come to your own like understanding of like what data you feel that you will need as applicants to like best answer the questions like inside of the booklet. and then give maximum time, like if you want to like ask for like any information, like from the members of the finance sub team or like global finance board. We always do our best to like answer. But yeah, it's kind of important you do so like with sufficient time and like with clarity on like what you kind of need. A lot of it is out there, and we'll do our best to help. Okay, but if there are no further questions, maybe that's a good note to like end this on. I will stop like the recording now. I think.